The Greenspan Floortime approach is Dr. Stanley Greenspan's version of Floortime. This is different from ICDL's version of Floortime, DIRFloortime, or Perfectum's version, DIR/Floortime, which is said to integrate ABA principles with Floortime. However, the confusion often arises between Dr. Stanley Greenspan's version, the Greenspan Floortime approach, and ICDL's version. While Dr. Greenspan did found ICDL and was the chair of it until his death in 2010, ICDL is still maintaining their belief in his principles. However, the application of the principles has started to look different. Even when Dr. Greenspan was chairing ICDL, he was not in charge of the training program or the certification program that was being offered. He was actually very discouraged by the quality of it and the inconsistency of the information and the approach that was coming out of it. He felt that many of the professionals who were being trained, even while he was the chair of ICDL, were not utilizing Floortime in the correct ways or comprehensively enough. After his passing, this divergence continued. His belief structure about what Floortime should be, which is written in most of his books and certainly was shared with people who are involved in the Greenspan Floortime approach, is a fairly definitive set of techniques and principles that allow people to do Floortime his way. After his passing in 2010, ICDL was overseen by two different CEOs, and each of these CEOs continued to revise the curriculum for the training further. While the training did need revision, unfortunately these revisions were done without the support of Dr. Stanley Greenspan's organization, Stanley Greenspan Inc., which oversees and owns the copyright to all of his material. To give you a simple example of how the curriculums have begun to diverge, on the very surface, one of the terms that Dr. Greenspan used to describe his overall developmental model with his 6 functional developmental stages, levels, milestones, or capacities are those terms. He used each of those terms in various publications. However, he was not definitive on using just one of them, and there was actually a reason for that. We at the Greenspan Floortime approach have adopted the use of milestones, whereas ICDL has chosen the term capacities. Both terms are accurate, however, neither of them fully does justice. When Dr. Greenspan came up with the idea of these different stages, milestones, levels, or capacities, and that children develop through them early in life, he believed that it was a stepwise process, even though it was not a definitive, firm, concrete step, meaning you go from one step to the next. He felt that the steps overlapped and that you were constantly revisiting them throughout life. In that way, because it wasn't a definitive stepwise process, the broader term capacities is a more effective description of a broad skill set that a child develops at different stages in life. However, as I just used the term stage or milestone or level, you can see we are progressing through different moments that do have definitive expectations at certain age ranges. So to say something like we develop through capacities and from one capacity to the next is not quite as clear as going from one milestone to the next or one stage or level to the next. But the simple fact of only picking one, whereas Dr. Greenspan kept it broad and vague somewhat on purpose, even though it might be confusing for some, does limit our perception of his work and changes our interpretation of it. Another difference that we've seen clinically and in practice with families that we've worked with who've worked with both ICDL and Greenspan Floortime people is that there are still professionals out there who misunderstand Dr. Greenspan's initial few stages. They're setting goals that work on things simply as shared attention or engagement, which are the first 2 stages, or even just focusing on what they would call regulation. However, you cannot have regulation without some form of emotional signaling. And in order to achieve emotional signaling, again, a child's emotional response to sensory or emotional stimulus the caregiver gives, such as the caregiver making a noise and the child looking with a smile or making a sound back at them, each of these are forms of reciprocity, or the beginning of two-way communication. So in order to achieve regulation, there has to be some sort of response pattern with the caregiver and child. This means we never work on just regulation, just shared attention, just engagement. We're working on all of them in tandem with, at minimum, trying to achieve some sort of response pattern from the child. Unfortunately, many families who are working with professionals outside of the Greenspan Floortime group are getting feedback that we just need to work on engagement or we just need to work on regulation. And while yes, working on those goals is important, we never just work on those. It actually is somewhat of a fool's errand to do that, because just working on engagement would mean just staring at each other and just trying to keep a child connected emotionally, which without some sort of exchange and response pattern is virtually impossible and actually becomes weird. One of the other crucial differences in the way in which Dr. Greenspan envisioned his training be carried out. Dr. Greenspan believed that in order to learn floor time, you had to do floor time. And doing floor time with 1 or 2 children did not mean that you actually knew how to do floor time with many children. And in truth, he never wanted there to be a firm certification training program that was especially done online. He felt that floor time was there for people to do, especially parents, and he didn't want to corporatize it. That being said, in order to help the community feel secure in a professional's ability to do floor time, having a certification and training program is necessary. However, how that training program plays out varies among different organizations. The Greenspan Floor Time approach training focuses on helping therapists, parents, and professionals learn how to apply floor time, not just learn the theory and principles behind it. In doing so, multiple videos of various children need to be submitted and get feedback for future application. This was one of the only ways that Dr. Greenspan felt a person could truly learn floor time, whether it be in person or virtually, but giving feedback based on trying to use the techniques associated with floor time was the only way that people could truly learn it. Watching someone else do it, talking about it, and actually learning about the theory behind it are all important pieces, but are actually much smaller pieces than actually doing it, practicing it, and getting feedback. These are just a few of the differences between Greenspan Floor Time and DIR Floor Time. While we tend to agree on many of the broader theoretical principles of the Greenspan DIR model, it's unfortunately when it comes down to the application of floor time where we start to see more variations. Some of that is due to the subjective nature of the application itself, but some of it is due to the training and information that is shared with the professionals who are trying to apply it. Hopefully in the future, Greenspan Floor Time and DIR Floor Time can come to terms and find a way to work together so that these differences can be resolved and we can help create a more streamlined approach for the entire community to benefit children.